And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wiggs in New Mexico.
John, residents of West Hollywood are still reacting to that video of a safety ambassador assaulting a homeless man, and CBS LA actually caught up with this guy to see what he thought about all of it.
Ooh, this doesn't look too good.
You know, I know that they want to find work for ex-cons and people who have had, let's just say, poor decision-making in the past. And we want to make them safety ambassadors so they'll go from the dark side to working for the good guys. But every so often, you're just going to have incidents like this.
Ooh, this doesn't look too good.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the opinion editor for the brand new California Post. You can follow him on X at Joel Pollak. Joel Pollak, welcome.
Hey, how are you guys?
We're great. Thank you so much for stopping by this afternoon.
Well, it's a fine afternoon in sunny California or rainy New York City, wherever you happen to be.
All right. Well, first of all, congratulations on the new gig. Congratulations on the new newspaper here in the state of California. If there's any state that needs a tabloid newspaper holding the people in power accountable, it's the state of California.
Absolutely. And we need that tabloid format because people want to have fun when they read the news. I was on the train today having a conversation with some work colleagues, and one of the other passengers overheard some of what I was saying and got into a very animated conversation about how much they love the Post and the sports and the gossip and everything. And they said, well, you know, we all know that's fluff, but it does make the newspaper fun to read. And that's the point. You have the serious issues, and California has serious problems, but you've also got to have some fun.
You do. And part of, I think, the fun is covering the serious issues, but covering it in a way that makes it user-friendly for the reader. Because part of what the New York Post does in New York City that makes it so successful is it takes these politicians and it takes these bold-faced names that typically do bad things to wreck the place, and it turns them into characters. And when you turn them into a character, people are suddenly interested in learning about what this person is doing. If they're a bad person and they're wrecking the city and they're just a nameless, faceless type of person, then they're usually allowed to continue doing whatever it is that they're doing because no one's minding the store. No one's paying attention. If the presentation from the press makes them interesting, dynamic people, then I think that the population is more likely to stay up to date on what's going on.
Yeah, and you mentioned the characters. I mean, that's really the key. Also, mockery and satire are not just effective ways of attacking an opponent, but also ways of keeping politicians down to earth. Caricatures and jokes, it's how we basically remind the leaders that we elect that they work for us, and when they get too high and mighty, they can always be brought back down to earth. And I think those with a sense of humor actually enjoy a little bit of the ribbing, and I think that shows a bit of maturity. So we're looking forward to lots of good covers and funny headlines in the years to come.
Now, prior to this, you had a very successful career as a senior editor at large over at Breitbart News. What made you want to make the jump to the California Post?
To be honest, it was the Palisades fire. I'm from Pacific Palisades, and I was affected by the fire. My house was slightly damaged. My fence burned down, but my neighborhood was destroyed. And I felt there was no accountability. Public officials just patting each other on the back for what a great job they did. And I was really looking for something to do about it. And the Post came along and really handed me the opportunity to try to improve things in California. And that's really the motivation, to be honest. I wasn't looking to leave Breitbart. I love Breitbart. I was very happy there for 15 years. But the California Post offered me a chance to focus on creating a new voice in California that could really change things. There's no excuse for California to be run as badly as it is. There's no excuse for us to have the kinds of problems we have. There's no excuse to have a budget in the state that doubles in 10 years without seeing any kind of improvement in public services or infrastructure. It's just beyond unreasonable that we have a governor who boasts about how we're the fourth largest economy in the world, and yet we lead the nation in unemployment and poverty. All of that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to have a dry reservoir on top of the hill behind your house. And it's just ridiculous. And this was an opportunity for me to sharpen that, to really channel that frustration and anger into something productive and something that will hopefully have an impact.
I think the poor coverage of state and local politics in the state of California, particularly by the Los Angeles Times, by public radio, by Spectrum, by the mainstream media, they have benefited from that. The people in power have benefited from the fact that the coverage is so dry and so boring and honestly not consistent. I mean, you look at stories like the French Laundry, it wasn't the LA Times that broke that. They didn't break that story. When Barbara Ferrer was ruling us like a queen during the COVID lockdowns, there were scandals that were popping up right and left that Jennifer Van Laar was breaking at Red State, but you would never read about it in the Los Angeles Times. And because they either ignored it or they reported on it in such a boring milquetoast way, I think that the people in charge essentially would get a free pass.
Well, look, I don't want to disparage these other publications because sometimes they do really good investigative work. I think the LA Times has done some great work on the fire, for example. And I think that Capital Public Radio did some great exposés early on about how Gavin Newsom was lying about what he was doing about wildfire prevention. So there is some good investigative work that goes on, but it is the persistent bias of much of the California media that allows politicians to ignore whatever they write, because they'll write about some of the things that go wrong, but then they'll just turn around and endorse the same politicians again anyway, or they'll make Trump the issue. You know, I was just reading a piece in one of the papers about Trump's decision to revoke the endangerment rule that let the EPA run wild on all these climate change regulations. And the headline was something like, Trump ignores science. No, Trump didn't ignore science. There's no science behind Obama's endangerment rule. It was simply an executive power grab designed to benefit the ideologues and the grifters in the climate change movement. And Trump just undid it. And he restored science, really. I mean, you could make that argument. Why would you say something so conclusory and partisan in the headline? It's just undermined their credibility. And the problem with having everybody agreeing with each other in California media is that you can't hold politicians accountable when there are no consequences, no real criticism for anything they do. And what's happened at some of these organizations is that the journalists have started to protest and walk out and quit when opinions they don't like suddenly appear in the paper. I mean, at UCLA now, Barry Weiss had to cancel her lecture because of security concerns. And one of the UCLA officials said that she would resign if Barry Weiss was allowed to speak on campus. I mean, that's the problem, is that people who supposedly uphold the First Amendment, whether it's freedom of speech or freedom of the press, have decided to suppress views they don't like. And that's why there's a market for the California Post and a need for it. And that's why the reaction has been so positive. And people have said, thank God you're here.
I don't know what your experience has been, but in my experience, and I've lived here my entire life, and many of my friends are liberals, many of my friends are Democrats, because you live in California and that's going to be your social circle. And when I talk to them about the failures in California, whether it's no water in the fire hydrants, no water in the reservoir as it relates to the fire in the Pacific Palisades, or they know the bullet train is supposed to be done by now and they can't buy a ticket on it because it doesn't exist. They know that they used to be able to buy shampoo without the assistance of an associate, but now it's locked up behind bulletproof glass because of retail theft is so bad. They know that They used to live in an area where there weren't bums on every corner, and now it's just unavoidable, not just on Skid Row, but all over the state. But they regard those issues as distractions. And they think that the real political issue that matters is hating on Donald Trump. And what they want from their state and local elected officials is for them to go on tirades against Trump. And whether or not they have any ideas as to how to fix any of those things is just not regarded as relevant by them. And I just don't see how we fix the state if we can't convince them that those failures and those issues are relevant and we don't have to live like this.
I think they know. I think people are starting to figure it out. It doesn't mean they're going to vote Republican, but I do think it means they're going to go for pragmatic alternatives, maybe within the Democratic Party and maybe in the Republican Party or maybe outside of politics altogether. I do think that people are going to start to realize that we have to do something different if we're going to save the state. And you know what? If we can't save the state, then we can't save the country, because California is, as Gavin Newsom likes to boast, one of the most successful parts of the United States. And there's really no excuse for failure. You know, he rolled out the red carpet for the leader of China when he came to San Francisco. They finally moved the homeless people off the streets for the sake of the leader of China. And people started to wonder, why can't you do that for the people who live here on a regular basis? And I think it's because Democrats have given in to the idea that even though they pretend they're defending democracy, they've given in to the idea that authoritarianism is actually a better way of running things. And they claim that Trump is some kind of dictator, but read between the lines. You've got the Thomas Friedmans at the New York Times, and you've got other people who say, I wish I could be dictator for a day and just impose all this climate change stuff or just do whatever I want. And they don't get good results by doing that. You need an opposition force in a democratic society. As John Stuart Mill wrote, you need opposition, not just to check the power of the majority, but to find mistakes, to offer better ideas, to offer alternatives, to provide different examples of governance where the opposition party can govern. And that's what we see across the country. I mean, why are people moving to red states? Is there some giant movement to blue states? No, there isn't. We see the results of the experiment. But California seems to be doubling down on really bad policies. And I see in LA County, we have supervisors who ought to be focused on rebuilding after the fires, passing resolutions denying ICE access to county property. I mean, we just have our priorities all messed up, and Democrats want to impose their way of life by fiat. And it's getting tiring because it doesn't work. So, I have a lot of faith in Americans, and Americans in the end will choose what works. And so I do think that there are some things that are going to change. You're starting to see signs of it, maybe even in places like San Francisco. And I think that's going to spread.
You mentioned that you think that people are aware of all the failures of the government and they're looking for alternatives. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to start voting Republican, but they're going to look somewhere for someone to come in and fix this mess. One of these people who could be, I guess, that person is the mayor of San Jose, Matt Mahan, who is running as a fierce critic of Gavin Newsom and the excesses of Sacramento. Do you think that his candidacy is a good test case to see how much anger exists within the Democratic Party of how the Democrats have governed the state?
No, because there are too many Democrats in the race already. And you don't see anybody dropping out yet to make room for Matt Mahan. I mean, I think there are so many egos and there's so much money involved right now in the race that you could actually see a split that goes 4, 5, or even 6 ways. And, had he run earlier, had he stepped up and declared his candidacy before all these other people had gotten into the race, maybe you could make a case. But I think he's struggling, even though he's got a lot of money. I think he's struggling because, look, you try getting Katie Porter to drop out. You try getting Tom Steyer with his billions to drop out. I mean, we may actually see 2 Republicans make the general election because the Democrats are splitting the vote so many ways. And they're such big egos, not one of them will step aside for the other. So we'll see what happens. I don't think it's a test of Matt Mahan, at least not yet. Not until they clear the field, which they could do, but they haven't done yet.
What about for the mayor's race in Los Angeles, where we now have a socialist candidate, Nithya Raman, who comes from the city council, who is challenging Karen Bass, at one time a very close ally of hers. And we saw a similar situation in New York City where there was an incumbent Democratic mayor who was deeply unpopular in that city. You had other Democrats like Andrew Cuomo jump in the race and run for that office. And the socialist ended up taking advantage of the fact that the opposition was split any number of ways and was able to sneak through and win that election. Do you think LA could elect a socialist mayor?
I think it's theoretically possible, but it's not going to happen this time. And it's because the unions have decided they're not with her. You know, the unions basically decide LA city elections. You know, I often would joke and say we have a two-party system in LA. We have the teachers union and we have the public works union. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And the big unions have decided that they're sticking with Karen Bass. And right now, unless something dramatic happens, it looks like she's going to defeat the socialists. Now, it doesn't mean that she's automatically going to win. You've got Spencer Pratt, who's running a solid race as a Republican. It is possible that you have enough of a split on the left that he makes the general election. And then, you know, anything can happen. But I think right now, for better or for worse, and probably for worse, there's going to be a Karen Bass re-election if nothing changes. Remember, Eric Garcetti, one of the worst mayors in the history of Los Angeles, was reelected with something like 80% of the vote. So it's not exactly something that inspires confidence. But look, maybe the Olympics will get people to focus on the right thing and to focus on the welfare of the city, to focus on rebuilding after the fire. Maybe we can put politics aside because we'll have to put politics aside. But let's see. We've got a long way to go before November.
You guys are a brand new newspaper, and you have been off to the races for several months now, poking fun at the people in power here in California, the mayor, the governor, different members of Congress, all people in between. Who's been the most thin-skinned so far?
Oh, Newsom is incredibly thin-skinned. I get emails from his office demanding corrections and retractions for articles that are 100% factual where they just don't like what we've written. Incredibly thin-skinned, and it's not going to work on the national stage, by the way. Trump throws a tantrum sometimes when he doesn't like coverage, but he's usually right. Whereas Newsom doesn't like facts. He gets upset with facts, and he tries to get people to take down things that are 100% factual. I'll give you an example. They sent me a correction request, actually a demand for a retraction, when I published a story about how Newsom had given $90 million to Planned Parenthood, and essentially for abortions. It was an opinion piece saying Newsom is funding abortions, but the state is bankrupt. And his office got upset. And they said, well, we're not taking this money. It was the most convoluted argument. They're like, the federal money that was cut wasn't paying for abortions, and so the $90 million is just replacing that. Yeah, but there's nothing in the $90 million that says it can't be used for abortion. And of course it's going to be used for abortion. That was the whole point of the big song and dance press conference that they had. So, you know, it's just the most ridiculous thing. They complain about facts when they don't like the facts. He's the most thin-skinned politician I've ever met.
Are they professional when they reach out privately, or are they bitchy like they are on X?
They're professionally bitchy. How about that?
All right, we split the baby there. Joel Pollak, who is the opinion editor at the California Post. You can follow him on X at Joel Pollak. Joel, congratulations on the new gig. Congratulations on the new paper. We look forward to having you back on the program and certainly reading your stuff.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
It's time to open up the California Crime Blotter.
It's happened yet again.
It's Wild Wild West out here.
It's the California Crime Blotter with John
And Randy.
And Randy, Pokemon is back in the blotter.
That's right. Yet another trading card store has been broken into because of Pokemon cards, this time in Anacrime. For more, here's NBC LA.
We have been telling you about the surge in thefts involving Pokemon cards in LA County. Some of the cards valued at thousands of dollars. Now, apparently it has happened again, but this time in...
You know what? Henry Lee, has it happened again?
It's happened yet again.
Now, apparently it has happened again.
Hey, It's something that unites the North and the South.
But this time in Anaheim, NBC4's Hetty Chang has exclusive security video that shows a group of men breaking into one business here in order to get into one business next door.
The business. See, it doesn't matter all the security that you have at your front door. They just break into the shop next door and tunnel through the wall.
This is like an episode of Looney Tunes.
The business owner at this insurance company believes the men knew exactly what they were after. His cameras show the men breaking into his business. They didn't take anything here, but then they took a sledgehammer, broke through the drywall, right into Dewey Pham's business.
Yosemite Sam's at it again.
The gaping hole in Dewey Pham's drywall is how the three masked men broke into his collectible shop on Harbor Boulevard around 3 a.m. Tuesday morning.
You want to talk about all the damage that is done for these crimes? Doors and windows is one thing, but you're actually destroying the wall that separates two businesses?
Oh, no, it's going to require major construction to fix this.
Around 3 a.m. Tuesday morning.
When I heard the notification,
do you think his insurance covers sledgehammer?
I don't think he has insurance.
The notification on my phone, my heart was pounding. So as soon as I see the alarm, I click on the footage. And then the live footage showing me someone's coming through that hole right there.
Pham's 9 security cameras captured the men working quickly through the store, grabbing several hundred Pokemon cards.
So they took a lot of smaller single cards and graded cards here. I have a lot of those, so it does add up to a lot.
Pham says the men were in and out of his store in less than 2 minutes.
Even in Orange County, police can't respond that quickly.
No, 2 minutes? It's not like an NFL 2 minutes where the last 2 minutes of the game take 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour. 2 minutes is 2 minutes.
These are professionals, and they know exactly what they're going for and what they're doing, and they know how to get in and out. I don't know how we stop them unless you have 24/7 armed security at the Pokemon card store.
He thinks...
Or, we start arming drones with weapons, but that's how the end of society comes.
And it's faster than you think.
He thinks the men got away with $180,000 worth of Pokemon cards. Pham says
that's more than some of these stories that we do where people bump off a jewelry store.
How do you recover from that if you're the shopkeeper?
You don't.
Pham says the high demand for the collectibles have made business owners who sell them vulnerable.
In this business, we have a target on our back where we cannot sleep well at night because sooner or later we're going to get break-in. So I felt like we worked very hard just to build this, to build this small community as a hobby that we love. So it is it's very sad when something like that happens.
Outside security cameras show the men getting in an older model, dark-colored car. Police believe possibly a Honda. They say they are working a number of leads. In Anaheim, Hetty Chang, NBC4 News.
There you go. Yet again, it has happened.
It's happened yet again.
Another trading card store robbed because of Pokemon cards, and they got away with $180,000 worth of them.
And just to be clear, this is not someone who is poor who's stealing to feed their starving family. These are professional burglars. This is what they do for a living.
And if you are the best in your field at stealing, you come to Los Angeles, you come to Orange County, you honed your craft in all these small places, and now you're working the big time, and there's no way these people are getting caught.
Let's go to John in Arizona. John, hello.
Hey, how's it going today, gentlemen?
Good.
Okay, I just wanted to comment. I love to, you guys aren't as positive as some of these other stations, and Randy doesn't seem to be as far as like the hope for LA. And I've called in before, Randy, as John on the YouTube, and I appreciate the plug about 6 months ago. Anyways, I just think it's too far gone, John. I think you'd have to start literally all over from elementary school up. With Karen Bass, I still go down there. I shoot video all the time. It's getting worse, and I mean everywhere. The promenade is still half empty. I just shot in Figueroa last week because I got a lot of stuff going on in Central Arizona. They're destroying buildings before they're even done. How do you absorb that as a developer? You cannot. That's number one. You look at the wires, strip the wires out of Wilshire Boulevard. I got that. The graffiti is from the 110 to the 5 on the 10 South Alley there. The graffiti, it's incomparable. I don't even know how that could even happen. Like, what they've done in 5 to 8 years, you think would take 50 years. I mean, the entire rooftops, facades of huge industrial buildings are just destroyed. And investors aren't stupid. That's why, like, I think Spielberg just picked up. Now he's leaving. Joel, I mean, I love the guy's stuff, but it's just not going to happen. And the people that he talks to, they're not South Central. South Central doesn't care. Mid LA doesn't care. Have you seen Koreatown? If you go down Koreatown at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Western north of Wilshire, all the way up to, say, I don't know, Second or something, or the freeway, man, it's fourth world. Koreatown. Before COVID, I used to have an office there in the 90s. Before COVID, it was pretty darn clean. I mean, I go to West LA, Sawtell, the little Japanese district. It's still relatively clean, but it's kind of ghettoed. There's graffiti, etched glass, cracked road, bums. Nothing like that when I lived there in the late 90s, up to 2002, actually. It was spotless. You could lick off the ground. Nowhere has gotten better. And how do you change it? So people always say, well, if, it's just not bad enough yet. For most people, it is, and they're used to it, and they're okay with that. Like, if you came from a third world country, how bad can it get in L.A. is still 10 times better than where they came from. And so to them, it's not a big deal. I don't know how Bass loses. And I have to say one thing on her behalf, and I'd never vote for her. I don't know how she takes all the blame for the fire. How would it have ever changed if she was there? And I'm going to give you guys one last thing, and you can spank me on the way out. I don't know if this has any meaning. The Department of Water and Power headed by a woman, Bass, mayor headed by a woman, fire chief headed by a woman, all the city council members are women. Does that mean anything?
Well, I could tell you this. I know it's easy to blame the elected officials, and certainly they deserve a lot of the blame. But the problems that we experience in Los Angeles are fundamentally the electorate. It doesn't seem to bother them that we live like this. It doesn't seem to bother them that we live in filth, that nothing works the way it's supposed to work, that we pay a fortune to live here. They just don't seem to care. And I don't know how you can live like that. I don't know how you can look at what you pay in taxes and think that you're getting services that reflect what you're paying for, but they do. And until they change, nothing's going to change, because right now, I think you're right. I think the likely scenario is that Bass gets reelected. And if she doesn't get reelected, my guess is she gets replaced by a socialist, which would make things worse in Los Angeles. But that's the electorate. These are the people that live here. I don't get it. It makes zero sense to me, but this is the way they think. This is the way they vote. And until something like that changes, I don't know how you change the government. Thank you for the call, sir. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Edward in the Bay Area. Edward, hello.
Yes, how are you guys? Thank you guys for having me. I'm a loyal listener, first-time caller, and I wanted to share the story from where I was hearing about, the older guys kind of falling into the younger ones and so forth. Should I start? I'm going to make it pretty short just so that we get the whole thing, but the way I listened to it, it was literally dead on. And the puzzles kind of fit into what I was going for. It all started pretty much on Facebook. Yeah. Everybody says, well, why Facebook? Whatever. I'm not a social media person, but I went on ahead and did that, put that in. One day I got a, hello thing, and conversation went on, just normal stuff, hey, how are you doing? How's the weather? Regular stuff. After a while, the girl asked me to switch over to WhatsApp, so I'm like, okay. I really hesitated. I'm like, no, I really don't, use that much, whatever. Convinced me, went over to the other end, and conversations were normal, still, how was your day, so forth. And it went on for about a couple of weeks, I would say, maybe. And then I started asking about, what was she doing, and where was she at, what did she do for a living, and so forth. And she would share a couple of pictures, something of a traveler that would work in the marine or boats, something like a medic. I didn't get that that exactly what that was, but it kept going on, and after a while, she was sharing some pictures where she would, I guess, would go to like a beach area or some kind of resort house, and then it was to the point where I started seeing my first flag, where I'm like, well, I knew that she had mentioned she was, not married and so forth. Out of the pictures that she had, I kind of zoomed in on the hands, and it was a giant wedding ring. But I mean, I know for a fact it was on the right hand. I mean, it was on the left hand how it should be. There was definitely some big old band in there, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. And I confronted her about it. I'm like, hey, I thought you were not married and so forth. It kind of switched the subject, and then it right away changed to where, like, hey, well, what do you like or whatever. I'm like, oh, I'm into flowers, and you want to send me.
How long did it take before she asked for money?
Maybe 4 weeks. So she was kind of smart in the sense where she was targeting with, my subjects of, what I do and what I like, cars and all that. And then it just switched after I confronted that first part. So I think it was to the point where, like, okay, we either get this guy, well, by then, we either get this guy or we don't. But it does happen because.
Did you give her any money?
No, I was lucky enough not to. I made a comment that, I had all kinds of things to do, and it went through my mind because it wasn't much. It was like, oh, just a little gift card to get this. But I'm like, I mean, you could be a good guy and, send some money, but I hesitated a little bit, made some excuses.
Now, wait a minute. When she wanted you to send gift cards to her, did she give you a physical address in the United States, or did she just want you to send it electronically?
She was going to give me the information, but because right away I kind of go, well, you know what? Let me get back to you on this. I'm going to go ahead and, head back to work real quick, and we'll continue this. So she never did, but the question was there. And then I kind of put that together between, the gift she wanted. And
what happened when you said no? When she asked for money and you said no, did she turn on a dime?
Yeah, because then later, it was like, well, I thought you said you work a lot. So kind of saying, yeah, you have the money. I did have the money, but right away I was already getting cold feet. But that it happened, it was so clean where the conversations just get you. So these people are definitely experienced talkers. There was never a mention of, any adultery stuff, whatever. Pictures, well, I mean, they weren't too bad. I mean, in the sense where they're not relieving, they were not showing anything. It was just that, okay, either I got you in the softer end in your mind. And I think that was the target. That was the target. But yeah, as far as the question, once they got to the gifts and all that, I'm like, nah, I don't think so, because she didn't.
Well, I'm glad you didn't get scammed. Thank you for the call, sir. I'm glad you didn't get scammed. But Randy, it seems like this is a lot more common than anyone thought.
It's incredibly common. We don't hear about the stories where this is unsuccessful, but I'm sure, like with any, system, they probably go through 100 people that don't fall for it before they finally get to the one that does. And they're probably the people that are working in these horrific situations. So, like, this is all international. These are people that are coming from Cambodia, and they're being forced to do this. They've probably got like 50 different cell phones, and they're talking to as many people as possible and trying to create these threads, because eventually when one of them pays off, it's hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. But this is massive. It is rampant, and there has to be somehow, I don't know how, but there has to be more done internationally about this, or the telecom companies have to do something about this, because they're using the phone lines to commit these crimes.
I used to get, and I'm not exaggerating, 10 spam phone calls a day. And I don't know what happened, but in recent months, that's fallen off a cliff. I don't get them anymore. I get spam text messages all the time where it's just some number that you don't recognize, and they just try to start a conversation with you. And I just report it as spam immediately. But the phone calls have stopped, for me at least.
When I got my new phone and I updated the new software, they now have this feature where your phone screens your calls for you. And it has made a huge difference, because nobody that knows me would ever try calling me on the phone. So anyone that's trying to call me from a number I don't know, I know is a scam, or it's someone trying to get me to participate in a gubernatorial poll. Otherwise, I don't want anything to do with it. So I don't answer the phone for anybody. I don't respond to any strangers that are trying to get me to invest in crypto on Facebook or Instagram, what have you. I respond to people that I don't know if I can tell they're listeners of the show, but you've got to be careful, because it is so rampant. There are so many scams out there. That's why you have to look for the red flags. And the number one red flag is crypto. As soon as they start talking about crypto, you know this is a scam.